What is up, friends? Takeover peeps, random person coming across this video. However you got here, I'm happy to have you. I hope that you all had wonderful weeks. I know I really enjoyed mine. My parents wrapped up their visit. They drove down from Minneapolis to come visit me in Florida. It was a lovely time with them. Ate good food, had good hangouts, went for walks, beautiful weather. Now we're changing over. It was like really hot when they were here though. Now we're finally changing over to like our fall weather here in Florida, which still isn't quite the fall that Minnesota offers, but there is a nice chill in the air and I'm really enjoying that. It was my wife's birthday this past weekend. We got together with some friends, went to Epcot. That was super fun. Walked around, had a bunch of tasty food, tasty drinks, and rode some fun rides. I tried S-Car Go for the first time, and it was surprisingly good. I had it in a little croissant deal. It's not something that I'll probably like crave, but I liked it. Question of the day. What is something that you are a total nerd about? I'm talking about the thing that you know way more about than the people around you, more than your friends or family or partner or spouse. That thing where like you can just go down a rabbit hole of your mind and dump all this information out, and it almost makes you wonder like why there isn't a special game show for you where you can be winning money off of all this knowledge that may or may not be useless to you. I definitely have my useless knowledge thing, and I oftentimes think like, how is it that I have this stored away, but I've let go of so many things that were probably important that I learned in school or things like that. Or like for me, it's information about like artists and bands, specifically in like the emo scene or the pop punk or rap or metal. Like those are my favorite categories. So shoegaze, things like that. I'll like know where members came from, when bands started, weird little tidbits about this album that came out, where artists went after they left that band or the band ended, things like that. And then I will forget the directions to some place that I have to drive to pretty frequently. What is your thing that's like that for you? Sports news. I almost said stuff. I haven't had any coffee yet. Anyways, the NBA is about to start. We're less than a week away. It's been really cool seeing some of these new players. Not all new players, but even like players that have gone on to new teams, see how they've done so far, even though we're not in the regular season yet. I think Damian Lillard and Giannis are going to be just unstoppable together. I'm excited to see how Anthony Simons does in the post-Dame era in Portland, along with Scoot Henderson. And obviously, I'm going to be watching very close on Chet Holmgren and Victor Wembanyama all year. In the NFL, we saw our last two undefeated teams lose games, and now they're no longer undefeated. The Eagles fell to the Jets, and the Niners fell to the Cleveland Browns. Now, I watched the Cleveland Browns and Niners game, and it was pretty exciting. I went down to the very end. My dad and I were watching it. Tight game. Didn't expect it to be so close, but Cleveland's defense is pretty darn good. And even though they had PJ Walker starting because what's his face, who's the starter, was out. A name that I should remember working in sports cards. Deshaun Watson. Deshaun Watson was out. PJ Walker was in. But Cleveland's defense stood their ground. They made it a rough day for Brock Purdy. But also the Niners were dealing with some injuries. Christian McCaffrey went out early. Debo was out early. But Brock Purdy was held to 125 yards and 1 touchdown while also throwing 1 interception. My Baltimore Ravens and Minnesota Vikings both won their respective games. That was very nice. It still kind of looks like a ruined season for the Vikings, but they're not completely dead yet. It does hurt that Justin Jefferson is out for like the next 4 to 6 weeks or possibly even longer, but we'll see what happens. As for the Ravens, they still have high playoff hopes. They squeezed out a win against the Tennessee Titans in the early London game. But honestly, the win against the Titans also wasn't that impressive because Ryan Tannehill got pulled not super early, but Ryan Tannehill's just not playing up to par per se. They just don't have very strong players. Derrick Henry is like their guy for sure, and he started off slowly. But a win is a win, and if they had lost, that would have been very disappointing. The Dolphins came off of their loss to Buffalo last week. They put up 42 points on the Panthers, who are now 0-6. Still very interested to see what goes on there because let's say the Panthers had the first overall pick. Do they move on from Bryce Young that fast? Maybe if they have a shot to draft Caleb Williams. I don't know. We'll see what happens. They also need good receivers. Pretty much every team needs to improve their offensive line this season. So there's a lot of factors. It's not always about just getting a quarterback. In that Panthers game, though, despite the loss, Adam Thielen, former Minnesota Viking, had himself a very good game. He had 11 catches for 115 yards and a touchdown. Speaking of good games, Tyreek Hill had an outstanding one. He continues to just dominate. He had a 6-catch, 163-yard day and is now just 186 yards away from reaching 1,000 on the season through only 6 games. Absolutely wild. Video game news, I've actually got some for you today. Minecraft just became the highest selling game of all time. I mean, based on the numbers, they were already the highest selling of all time, but they hit a whole new just milestone. They've now sold over 300 million copies, which is a lot. Like, think about it. Think about your favorite like band's records that have sold, or like other video games. I've got some numbers for you here. Like, for some perspective, Mario Kart 8 is the highest selling Mario Kart game of all time. Also one of the highest selling Nintendo games of all time. And it has sold just 63 million, which first of all is no small number, but 63 million compared to 300 million? I mean, think about that. And another bit of news is a callback to a game we were talking about either last week or a couple weeks ago. The Spider-Man 2 game comes out on the 20th. Very excited for that, although I can't play it yet because it is a PS5 exclusive. It was also announced that a console titled Analog 3D, which I don't really quite understand yet exactly what it is, but I will do more research and we'll talk about it in the future. Anyways, though, it sounds really cool. It's slated for a 2024 release, and it will play Nintendo 64 games at a 4K resolution. Now, this is really cool to me because I grew up on the Nintendo 64. I was a Nintendo 64 era kid. There are so many games on there, like GoldenEye, for example, that I have very, very good memories with. Now, although I do enjoy going back and playing GoldenEye, I have realized that a lot of the love for it was better left as a memory. Now that we have such better graphics now, it is kind of tough going back to those graphics. It is still fun to like play for a little bit if you got some buddies, but it is a tough play. So if I could play GoldenEye in 4K resolution, I'm curious as to if that makes it more fun or if that takes away from the memories of the way the N64 graphics looked. Anyways, there are some games that I think could be served well from this. Star Fox is a fantastic game, and I would love to see Star Fox 64 in 4K, things like that. We'll see what they've got here, though. We'll stay tuned. We'll talk about it more as I learn more. For another little thing, I bought a Nintendo Power magazine, and I am very excited about this. Came in the mail. Now, the reason why I bought this was I remember way back when Pokemon was first getting rolling, a buddy of mine in grade school gifted me this little Pokemon comic. Just a very mini, like, basically the comic of one of the episodes of TV, the TV show. Now, I still have that comic, but it is well worn, well used. I, rolled it up and stuck it in my pocket. I brought it on trips. I read it in the car over and over, took it to the playground, just all sorts of things. So I wanted to find these again. I was looking for them on eBay, and there's some that are, like decently priced, but there's others that were like, I'm not going to pay that necessarily. So I've been wanting to dabble in some of the old Nintendo Power magazines, not just necessarily for like collecting, but just because I want to read through them. Like, I think that would be fun. And I remember that they came from the Nintendo Power magazine, so I bought this one. And lo and behold, we got the comic inside there, and it's in nice shape. So it was actually cheaper for me to buy the whole magazine than to buy the comic, according to the listing that I found. But this is just a really cool magazine in general. We got like the old Pokemon stuff in there. Tony Hawk Pro Skater was just being teased. It wasn't even out yet. They're talking about how you can skate in a game and what it's going to look like. I'm excited to read through it, but here's the other thing. I'm going to make a video specific for this. Those look through like magazines I've done some for AP magazines. I've done some for Beckett. We're going to do that with this Nintendo Power. So that will be coming in the near future. Stuff that slaps. This one just makes me laugh today, but it slaps. Vicks Vapor Rub. I meant to buy a container. Hold it on screen, but I didn't. I couldn't find the one that I have, but this is, I don't know why it's so funny to me. It's just stupid. Now, I hate being sick, but if there was one, like, I hate to use the word cool or fun or anything like that, but within the realm of already being sick, you gotta find what feels good. Vicks Vapor Rub it's not even necessarily like a good smell, but it's a comforting smell. It's a memory. I lived for the moment, once again, within having the cold. First of all, watching The Price is Right on TV if you're homesick from school, but the comforting moment at night where you're falling asleep and you probably just like took some cough syrup and you're falling asleep, but you got the Vicks Vapor up on your chest and you can smell it. It's just so calming, so relaxing. You can just drift right off. Now, I have actually put this on my chest when I'm not even sick as like a comforting thing. There was a night not that long ago where I just wanted a very restful night to sleep. And I decided to drink some chamomile tea, go to bed at a decent time, and put some Vicks Vapor on my chest. And it worked. It felt good. Whether it's placebo or not, I don't care. It just brings back child memories of like getting over a cold or like that comfort at night, being all bundled up in warm blankets. And the Vapor Rub, I don't know what to tell you. Maybe you have the same memories. Maybe you think I'm just being weird. But anyways, Vicks Vapor Rub certified slapper. Shout out to Vicks. Music pick. Today I am going with MxPx's album, Slowly Going the Way of the Buffalo. I don't know how many of you grew up in the church in the 90s. Like me, I was a 90s church kid. But if you did, you probably know who MxPx is. You probably know who MxPx is even if you didn't grow up in the church. MxPx was like the edgy Christian band that you listened to. They were a punk band, pop punk band out of Bremerton, Washington. They were like those kids in the youth group that were like just a little bit cooler, but then also like they weren't the preppy kids. They were for sure like the punky kids. So like at your school, they might have not been like the kid that you hung out with per se, if you weren't already one of those kids. But in a youth group, it was like within the church realm. I mean, it was the girl you had a crush on, maybe the guy you had a crush on. It was the music where like, yeah, you were in church on Sunday, but it doesn't mean that you weren't at the party on Saturday and you're probably really sleepy on Sunday morning. It was like that kind of music. That's my explanation of it. Anyways, we're talking about their 1998 release. Slowly Going the Way of the Buffalo was titled based on, they had received a fan letter who was disappointed. This was their fourth studio album, was disappointed at the direction of the band and stated that they were slowly going the way of the buffalo. So they titled the album that, which I think is a very clever, funny move. I grew up an MxPx fan and still am to this day. I mentioned the girl in youth group because there was definitely this one at a church camp who I saw with like the Poconacha patch on her jeans, and I thought she was so cool and would never want to talk to me. And spoiler alert, we never did talk. But that I still have like the very specific like MxPx fan lodged in my memory. I saw MxPx was releasing new music or had a new album out or something. I watched an interview with their lead singer. So that made me want to revisit this album. This album was like a huge commercial success for them. The previous one before this was titled Life in General, and it already did very well. They had a song that broke through to MTV and made it through the ranks of top videos. But with this album, they were back with an even bigger push. See, they were signed to a record label called Tooth and Nail Records. Tooth and Nail Records for Life in General struck a cooperative deal with A&M Records to help co-market the previous album, and now A&M was doing an even bigger push for Buffalo. I saw somewhere that there was something where like A&M picked a random 1,000 fans, maybe they're part of a fan club or something, I don't really know, and just sent them the album as part of a promo campaign. And once again, these are numbers and things I'm grabbing off the internet, so if they're slightly inaccurate or something, forgive me. But I saw that basically like the labels thought, hey, maybe we'll sell 100,000 copies of this, which is no small feat. That is to say, they blew those numbers out of the water. This album ended up going gold. Gold means you sold over 500,000 records, so they blew that out of the water. The band also saw some success around the year this came out in the tours they were having. They made it onto the 1998 Warped Tour lineup. They went on tour in Europe with the band Bad Religion, and then shortly thereafter, they went on tour with Blink-182, which, if you think about Blink-182 in 1998, if you're able to be one of the openers for that tour, that was probably some great exposure. The album charted at number 99 on the Billboard 200 and also made it to number 2 on the Christian music charts. As for the sound of this album, it's honestly just like a very classic pop punk album. 16 tracks, 40 minutes long. None of the tracks are very long. Catchy choruses, fast drums, mostly 3-chord progressions, maybe 4 chords sometimes. All the classic punk things you can think of. My personal favorite songs are Tomorrow's Another Day, I'm Okay, You're Okay, Invitation to Understanding, which it's not my favorite version of the song. There is a B-side that they later released on some other little EP that's an acoustic version of Invitation to Understanding, and that is my favorite, but this is still a very good version in its full pop-punky form. And a song called Fist versus Tact. Just because Fist versus Tact brings up a sudden little shake-up in the album. They've actually got a guest vocalist doing some yelling on there, Jeff from the band 90 Pound Wuss. There is also a song in here where they bring on the vocalist of Bad Religion, so they had some cool guest appearances on this one. Like I always say, I appreciate listening through a whole album. If you want to just dabble, maybe check out the songs that I listed by title as my favorites, but I encourage you to always listen to the whole album if we're talking about an album. And once again, this is 16 tracks long, but it's only 14 or 40 minutes. 14 minutes would be super fast. That would be like amazing speed punk. 40 minutes long. So throw it on in the background. It's not really going to take up that much of your time, but it is a very good listen. Thank you so much for hanging out with me, guys, this week. I will see you guys soon. Peace and love.